left alone at the hotel. What no one knew about that night.
Imagine arriving at a hotel after a long day, exhausted, expecting to be greeted by familiar faces, only to find yourself completely alone. That night, I walked through the polished lobby, dragging my suitcase behind me, heart light with the anticipation of a fun evening with friends, or so I thought. I had meticulously planned this trip, paid for the hotel in full, covered the meals, the excursions, every little detail. Everything was taken care of, everything except for the one thing I hadn't counted on, being ditched. As I reached the front desk, I looked around for the group I had traveled with. Empty, not a trace of them in sight. No greetings, no apologies, no explanations. My mind raced. Where are they? I muttered under my breath, disbelief mixing with irritation. The lobby, usually buzzing with the low murmur of guests, suddenly felt eerily silent, amplifying the sense of abandonment. Every step I took toward the elevator echoed through the quiet hallway, a stark reminder that I was completely on my own. The first wave of emotion that hit me was shock. How could this happen? I had coordinated everything, made all the arrangements, and yet here I was, standing in a suite meant for a group, knowing full well that the luxury I was about to enjoy had already been paid for by my own hands. A sense of irony washed over me. The very people I trusted to share in this experience had left me behind, unaware that I was the one who had financed it all. The thought was almost laughable if it weren't so infuriating. Then came the rush of anger and disbelief, a cocktail of frustration and humiliation. How often does one get ditched like this in a place where strangers are bustling about, oblivious to your predicament? I felt a mix of vulnerability and determination. Vulnerability because I was alone in an unfamiliar city, but determination because the situation was absurd enough to demand a response. I refused to be just a passive victim. That night, the shock didn't just paralyze me, it ignited something else entirely, a spark of resolve that would soon turn the tables in a way they never expected. The hotel itself was a masterpiece of understated luxury, the kind that makes you feel like you've stepped into a different world the moment you cross the threshold. Marble floors stretched underfoot, polished so smoothly that the reflections of chandeliers shimmered like liquid gold. The scent of fresh flowers mingled with a faint hint of citrus cleaner, creating an oddly calming yet sophisticated aroma. Plush armchairs were arranged in small clusters, inviting quiet conversation, while a grand piano in the corner promised the soft, elegant notes of live music, though tonight it remained silent, as if anticipating the drama about to unfold. Soft lighting bathed the lobby in warm tones, turning ordinary corners into shadowed alcoves, where one might imagine secret conversations taking place. Large floor-to-ceiling windows looked out onto a cityscape alive with flickering streetlights and the distant hum of nightlife. Outside, the city moved on without pause, blissfully unaware of the scene inside. Me, standing alone, luggage in hand, in a hotel suite that was meant to be bustling with laughter, shared stories, and clinking glasses. Instead, the only sound was the faint hiss of the air conditioning, the subtle creak of my suitcase wheels on the polished floor, and the occasional rustle of staff quietly attending to guests who were not part of my story. I remember noticing the small, thoughtful touches that had been meant to enhance the group experience. The neatly folded towels embroidered with the hotel's emblem, the welcome tray with chocolates and a bottle of sparkling water, the soft bathrobes hanging just so. Every detail screamed hospitality. Every detail reminded me that this was supposed to be a shared experience. And yet, it was all just for me, and the irony wasn't lost. The space was luxurious, yes, but the emptiness made it feel oddly hollow, almost theatrical, as if the stage had been set for a performance that never arrived. The contrast between the elegance of the surroundings and the sudden loneliness I felt created a strange tension. It was a surreal moment, walking through corridors meant to be filled with laughter and chatter, only to find silence echoing off the walls. It was in this contrast, the polished perfection of the hotel against the raw reality of my isolation, that the gravity of the situation truly hit me. I realized that I wasn't just in a luxurious hotel, I was in a crucible of opportunity. And sometimes it's in the quietest, loneliest places that the most decisive moments are born. The people who left me behind weren't strangers. They were the ones I trusted, the ones I had envisioned sharing this experience with. Friends, companions I had laughed with, planned trips with, and confided in. People I had assumed would show up, not just physically, but emotionally, present to enjoy the moments, the memories, the spontaneous adventures that make trips worth taking. And yet, despite all that history, they vanished, leaving me alone in a hotel that I had funded entirely. The realization hit like a punch. Betrayal doesn't always roar, it sometimes whispers in the silence of an empty room. At first, I thought it had to be a misunderstanding. Maybe they had arrived earlier and I had missed them. Maybe they were in another part of the hotel. I checked every corner, every lounge, even the pool area, hoping against hope that my trust hadn't been misplaced. But the truth was unavoidable. They had intentionally left. They had made a choice, a conscious decision to abandon me, while I covered all expenses, to leave me to navigate the night, the hotel, and the situation alone. The anger I felt was sharp and immediate. How could people I considered loyal, people I thought I knew, treat me this way? There was also disbelief, a kind of stunned incredulity that made me question if I had imagined the entire scenario. Betrayal from strangers is expected, even cliché, but from friends, it cuts differently. It lodges deep, festering in a way that leaves you questioning your judgment and your understanding of relationships. I felt a mix of humiliation and frustration. Humiliation because anyone walking into the hotel could see me standing alone, luggage in hand, with no one to share the moment with. Frustration because I had done everything right. I had planned, organized, and paid for it all, yet my efforts were disregarded, unacknowledged, and ultimately wasted in the eyes of those I trusted. And beneath the anger and disbelief, there was hurt, a raw personal ache that made the betrayal sting even more. It wasn't just that I was alone, it was that the very people I expected to be there had dismissed me, showing that my presence, my effort, my generosity meant less to them than I had thought. That night, the betrayal became more than a moment of abandonment. It became a defining point. It was a realization that trust can be fragile, loyalty can be conditional, and sometimes the people you rely on most are the ones who will surprise you in the worst way possible. As the initial shock of betrayal began to settle, another realization hit me like a wave. I had already paid for everything, every single detail of the trip. The hotel, the meals, the excursions, even the little extras meant to make the experience memorable had been covered by my own credit card. I had spent weeks meticulously planning the finances, ensuring everyone would have a seamless experience without worrying about costs. And now, the irony of the situation was almost unbearable. Here I was, standing alone in a luxurious hotel, fully paid for, while the very people who were supposed to be my companions had vanished into thin air. The financial aspect added a strange, bitter twist to my emotions. It wasn't just the personal betrayal that stung, it was the awareness that my generosity had been completely disregarded. I had invested not just money, but effort, thought, and care, and that investment had been met with indifference. Every dollar spent, every reservation made, every thoughtful detail intended to make the trip special for all of us now felt like it had been a private gift to myself, a gift I hadn't intended to enjoy alone. The situation was absurd, almost comedic if it weren't so frustrating. The very resources I had provided to ensure our shared enjoyment had become the tools of my solitary adventure. And yet, within that irony lay an unexpected advantage. Because I had paid for everything, I had power in this scenario that the others hadn't anticipated. While they had walked away, abandoning me, they hadn't realized that the stage was set entirely under my control. I had access to the rooms, the amenities, the luxuries, all of it paid for and waiting for me. The financial shock, which initially felt like another layer of insult, began to shift subtly into empowerment. I could turn this absurd situation into an opportunity. It was in this realization that the seed of my plan was planted. The betrayal stung, yes, and the loneliness was palpable, but the fact remained I held the keys, literally and figuratively, to the experience. They had underestimated not just my resilience, but also my ability to take control of a situation they thought would leave me powerless. That night, the money I had spent, which seemed like a wasted gesture in the face of abandonment, became the foundation for a bold and decisive move, one that they would never see coming. The moment fully sank in, and with it came a flood of emotions so intense I could barely think straight. First came frustration, a sharp, almost physical sensation that coiled in my chest. How could this happen? How could the people I trusted completely abandon me, leaving me alone in a hotel I had paid for, surrounded by amenities meant for shared enjoyment? Every detail I had meticulously arranged suddenly felt wasted, and the unfairness of it all gnawed at me. It was like preparing an elaborate feast only to have the guests vanish at the moment the food was served. Alongside the frustration was loneliness, an acute, piercing sense of isolation. The hotel, so elegant and full of potential, suddenly felt cavernous, echoing with emptiness. The polished marble floors and lavish furnishings, which usually signal comfort and indulgence, now highlighted the absence of companionship. I imagined my friends laughing somewhere else, oblivious to the scene unfolding in my suite. Loneliness has a way of sharpening awareness. I noticed every detail, every shadow, every echo of my own footsteps. The contrast between the opulence around me and the void of human connection made the betrayal sting even more. But in the midst of this, a surprising and powerful shift began to take place. Alongside frustration and loneliness came a growing sense of empowerment. I realized that while they had walked away, I still had control over the situation. I had the resources, the hotel, and the opportunity to decide what would happen next. That initial anger transformed into a quiet, simmering determination. The very act of being left behind became a catalyst for agency. I could let this moment defeat me, or I could turn it into an opportunity to assert myself. As the minutes passed, frustration and loneliness began to fuel resolve. I began to think strategically, imagining what I could do with the tools at my disposal. The situation had shifted from helplessness to possibility. What started as anger and abandonment began evolving into focus and purpose. The emotional roller coaster, the sting of betrayal, the isolation, the irony of paying for it all alone, transformed into motivation. By the end of that night, I knew that whatever unfolded next would be on my terms. I wasn't just a passive observer in this story. I was about to take action, and that emotional mix, frustration, loneliness, and empowerment, was the spark that ignited the plan. As the night stretched on and the initial storm of frustration and loneliness began to settle, a new clarity emerged. It was in that quiet, almost eerie stillness of the hotel suite that I realized something crucial. I didn't have to be a passive victim in this situation. I didn't have to let their betrayal define the night or my experience. In fact, the very circumstances that seemed unfair, the abandonment, the financial irony, the solitude, gave me an unexpected advantage. It was a moment of reckoning, the point at which I could either sink into self-pity or seize control. And in that instant, I made my decision. I would make my move. The shift from victimhood to action was immediate, almost electric. I took a slow breath, surveying the luxurious surroundings that had once felt hollow and now seemed full of potential. Every detail I had paid for, the hotel rooms, the amenities, the access to experiences, was now mine to command. The anger and disappointment that had weighed so heavily on me transformed into a strategic energy, a sense of purpose that was sharp, clear, and undeniably liberating. The betrayal that had initially felt like a trap now felt like a catalyst, an unexpected opportunity to assert myself in a way no one could have predicted. I started thinking not about what I had lost, but what I could gain. The hotel was no longer just a backdrop for disappointment, it was a stage for action. The tools were all there, resources I had already paid for, spaces designed for enjoyment, and a story that was mine to write. I could either dwell on the absence of others or use their abandonment to fuel a decisive, bold move that would shift the narrative entirely in my favor. In that moment, the power of choice was exhilarating. It was also a moment of self-realization. I recognized that the emotions swirling within me, frustration, loneliness, betrayal, were not just obstacles, they were fuel. They sharpened my focus and clarified my intentions. Making my move wasn't just about responding to the situation, it was about reclaiming control over the night, the space, and ultimately, myself. I would turn what felt like defeat into opportunity, transforming the narrative from one of abandonment to one of strategy, cleverness, and empowerment. That night, the turning point wasn't dramatic or flashy. It was a quiet, resolute decision made in the stillness of an empty hotel. But that decision would define everything that followed. It was the night I refused to be sidelined, the night I shifted from passive observer to active player, and the night the story truly began. Once the turning point settled in, I knew that simply sitting in my hotel room, stewing in frustration and betrayal, wasn't an option. I had to act, and act decisively. The plan began to form in my mind, as clear and precise as a chess strategy. First, I assessed the resources at my disposal. The hotel was fully booked and paid for, meaning I had access to rooms, amenities, and staff who were completely unaware of the drama unfolding behind the doors. Every tool I needed to take control of the night was already in place. The first step was to reclaim the narrative. I made a conscious choice to stop thinking of myself as abandoned and start thinking of myself as empowered. If they had underestimated me, I would show them that I could thrive in a situation they thought would cripple me. I began by securing my own comfort, ordering room service, arranging the suite exactly how I liked, and setting the environment to reflect confidence and control. Every small action was deliberate, a way to reclaim ownership over the night. Next came the element of surprise, the part that would truly redefine the situation. I realized that their abandonment had left opportunities for unexpected advantages. I could leverage my paid access to the hotel in ways they never anticipated. I explored the hotel's amenities, from the rooftop terrace to the exclusive lounge, as if I owned the place. I sent messages to mutual friends, letting them know where I was and subtly demonstrating that I was not defeated. By the time they realized I wasn't just sitting around stewing, the night had already shifted. But the boldest step came when I turned the tables in a way that was both clever and satisfying. I used the resources I had, reserved dinners, special access to events, and luxurious rooms, to create moments that not only highlighted my independence, but also subtly reminded them that I had funded the entire experience. It wasn't revenge in a bitter sense, it was strategic, demonstrating control, wit, and confidence. Every move was calculated to maximize the advantage I had in a situation that had initially seemed entirely against me. By the end of the night, I had transformed what began as abandonment into a triumph of ingenuity and poise. I had turned the tables, reclaimed control, and created a story that no one else could have anticipated. The strategic response wasn't about retaliation, it was about empowerment, seizing opportunity from adversity, and proving to myself that even in moments of betrayal, decisive action can completely change the game. The results of that night were both immediate and unexpectedly satisfying. By the time the dust settled, the scenario had shifted completely. What began as a moment of frustration, loneliness, and betrayal had transformed into a showcase of initiative, creativity, and empowerment. I had taken control of a situation that was initially stacked against me, and in doing so, I discovered an unexpected sense of accomplishment. Every calculated step I had taken, the strategic use of the hotel's amenities, the subtle assertion of my independence, and the clever maneuvering to turn my abandonment into advantage, culminated in a night that was uniquely mine. One of the first consequences I noticed was the shift in perception among my peers. Those who had ditched me were suddenly aware that their actions had not left me powerless. I had turned the resources they assumed they would share, but had abandoned, into tools that highlighted my autonomy and ingenuity. There was a quiet, undeniable lesson in that night. Underestimating someone can backfire spectacularly. Without any confrontation, without shouting or blaming, the events themselves served as a statement, a demonstration of resilience, quick thinking, and the ability to turn adversity into opportunity. Beyond the lesson I imparted to others, the personal satisfaction I gained was profound. There was a deep, almost liberating sense of pride in knowing that I had taken control when circumstances could have easily left me defeated. I realized that the betrayal I had experienced wasn't just a challenge, it was an invitation to assert myself, to test my resourcefulness, and to redefine the narrative on my own terms. The emotional high of transforming anger and frustration into action was intoxicating, reinforcing the idea that even in moments of unexpected adversity, we retain the power to choose our response and shape the outcome.
In the broader sense, the night had a lasting impact on me. It wasn't merely a story of being abandoned at a hotel, it became a personal milestone. I had proven to myself that setbacks, betrayal, or neglect from others do not have to dictate our experience. With focus, strategy, and confidence, we can reclaim situations, turning potential defeats into victories. That night, I walked away not only with the memory of clever maneuvers and unexpected triumph, but also with a reinforced understanding. Resilience and self-reliance are often our most powerful tools, and sometimes the very moments that seem like misfortune are the ones that define us the most. Looking back on that night, the lessons I learned extend far beyond the surface drama of being abandoned at a hotel. At first glance, it might have seemed like a story about betrayal, bad luck, or inconsiderate friends, but in reality, it became a profound lesson in self-reliance and the power of confidence. I realized that the moments when others fail us, when plans fall apart, or when life throws unexpected challenges our way, are often the moments that test our true character. It's easy to feel defeated, to dwell on what went wrong, but the real measure of resilience is how we respond in those moments. The first lesson was self-reliance. Being left alone in a situation where I had assumed I would have support forced me to confront the truth. I could rely on myself. I had the resources, the skills, and the initiative to turn the situation around. I didn't need validation, accompaniment, or approval from others to navigate the night successfully. That realization was empowering. It reinforced the importance of trusting your own judgment and abilities, even when external circumstances seem bleak, or when the people around you fall short of expectations.
Confidence was another critical lesson. I discovered that confidence is not about arrogance or loud declarations, it's about quiet, deliberate action. It's about believing in your ability to take control, make decisions, and assert yourself when needed. That night, the simple act of shifting my mindset from frustration and loneliness to strategy and initiative changed everything. The confidence to act decisively allowed me to transform what initially felt like a loss into a personal victory. Finally, the experience taught me the art of turning adversity into opportunity. The betrayal, the financial irony, and the isolation were challenges, yes, but they became the very tools I used to succeed. Adversity, when approached with creativity and resolve, can reveal unexpected advantages. It can push us to discover strength we didn't know we had and inspire solutions we might never have considered under ordinary circumstances. Ultimately, the night became a testament to resilience, resourcefulness, and the power of perspective. What could have been a story of disappointment and frustration turned into one of empowerment and ingenuity. I walked away with more than a clever story. I walked away with a reinforced belief that challenges are opportunities in disguise, and that with self-reliance, confidence, and creativity, we can transform setbacks into defining moments of triumph. As the night came to a close and I reflected on everything that had unfolded, it became clear that the true impact of that evening went far beyond the initial drama. What started as a moment of betrayal and isolation had transformed into a story of empowerment, resilience, and cleverness, qualities that we all have the potential to harness in our own lives. The takeaway is simple yet profound. Even when circumstances seem stacked against us, we always have the ability to reclaim control, redefine the narrative, and turn adversity into opportunity. The experience reinforced that empowerment often comes from unexpected places. I had been abandoned, underestimated, and placed in a situation that initially felt unfair. Yet, by focusing on what I could control rather than dwelling on what I couldn't, I found strength and agency I hadn't fully realized before. Empowerment isn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes it's about subtle, deliberate decisions that shift the balance in your favor, about choosing to act when others have chosen inaction. That night, each small step I took, reclaiming the hotel, leveraging the resources I had paid for, and turning the situation into a personal triumph, was a demonstration of how self-determination can completely change the outcome of any challenge. Resilience, too, played a key role. Life is full of unexpected twists and moments where people disappoint us or plans fall apart. What matters most is how we respond. Instead of succumbing to frustration or self-pity, I chose to channel my emotions into action. Resilience isn't just enduring difficulties, it's actively transforming them into opportunities for growth, creativity, and success. That night was a perfect example of how setbacks can become the catalyst for ingenuity, courage, and memorable moments of triumph. Finally, there is cleverness, the ability to turn what others see as a disadvantage into a strategic advantage. I didn't react with anger or seek revenge. Instead, I thought strategically, moved decisively, and created an outcome that surprised everyone, including myself. Cleverness in action isn't about outsmarting others to prove a point. It's about using wit, creativity, and resourcefulness to navigate challenges and emerge stronger. So, as I stand here sharing this story, the message is clear. Life will throw curveballs, people may disappoint, and situations may seem hopeless. But in those moments, we have the power to act, to innovate, and to triumph. That night, I didn't just survive being abandoned, I turned it into a story of empowerment, resilience, and cleverness that will stay with me forever. And that, ultimately, is the lesson worth remembering.